Hey, Dragon Ball's history on the Game Boy Advance is something almost sacred. A small screen, a warm backlight, and a world that felt so much bigger than the device in your hands. From the early days of Legacy of Goku to the fast-paced battles of supersonic warriors, these games etched themselves into childhoods everywhere, imperfect, ambitious, and unforgettable. But among all those memories, there is one title that always felt a little different. A game that never quite fit with the others, like a wandering fragment of GT drifting through the handheld era. Dragon Ball GT Transformation, the black sheep of the Game Boy Advance lineup. And today we're stepping into the story of the sequel that never arrived. Originally carrying different names during development, the Legacy of Goku V, later Transformation 2, was meant to continue Webfoot Technology's final journey with this franchise. Webfoot, a studio remembered for giving us some of the most iconic and most divisive Dragon Ball titles on the system. Unlike the top-down RPGs that came before, Transformation shifted the entire formula, turning GT into a side-scrolling brawler. It retold the beginning of the GT storyline, Pilaf's wish to turn Goku into a child, and Earth's looming destruction, the early spacefaring adventures of Goku, Trunks, and Pan searching for the Black Star Dragon Balls. Now, this game wasn't a masterpiece, but it wasn't a disaster either, landing somewhere in the middle with an average score around a 68%. Yet despite its modest reception, the game ended with the promise. Dr. Gero and Dr. Mew rising together in Hell, teasing the road to Super 17. A sequel was planned, one that might have carried GT's handheld saga a little further, but between low sales and minimal interest, the project faded away. By 2006, the Legacy of Goku V was quietly abandoned, leaving only its shadow behind. But recently, pieces of the past have started to resurface, old documents, design notes, and fragments of plans that reveal what this sequel was meant to become, and surprisingly was far more ambitious than anyone could have expected. It's always fascinating peeling back the curtain on a project that they never had a chance to breathe, so if you want to explore those details yourself, I'll have everything linked below. Now, what makes these documents so fascinating is how clearly they reveal the ambition behind this cancelled project. Transformation 2 wasn't meant to be another handheld brawler, it was imagined as something far bigger, something that pulled together the best piece of the Dragon Ball's Game Boy Advance legacy. According to the outline, Transformation 2 was envisioned as an RPG-enhanced arcade-style action game, a kind of spiritual fusion between the Legacy of Goku series and the fast-paced Supersonic Warriors title. The team wanted to evolve the foundation of the first game, pushing into something louder, faster, and far more alive. The sequel was meant to feel chaotic in the best way possible, a battlefield constantly filled with 3 to 4 characters fighting together in real time. Even in single player, you'd never be alone. You'd command an entire squad, one fighter under your control, and 2 allies orbiting you like satellites, each ready to jump into the fray. A single button let you swap between teammates instantly. You could also adjust their behaviors behind the scenes, aggressive, defensive, supportive, or somewhere in between. And with each mission, characters would level up, unlock moves, and grow alongside you. Now by the end, the roster would have 14 heroes and 1 fully playable villain. Essentially a full GT era cast condensed into a handheld dream list, but what makes the roster feel special isn't just the number of characters, but it's how distinct they were meant to be. Now since Transformation 2 covers the last 2 sagas of the GT storyline, the player will in the end get an opportunity to pick from playable characters with Goku in his Super Saiyan forms, Pan, Trunks in his Super Saiyan forms, Goten and his Super Saiyan form, Majub, Vegeta, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, Chi-Chi wearing pots and pans for armor, and Nova Shenron, who was even stated to have a special ability. Since his body burned at 6,000 Celsius, he would damage anything that touched him. He could summon a giant focusing lens to amplify not only his own key attacks, but even blasts from teammates. The documents even suggest that the final roster count wasn't locked, meaning even more characters might have been planned. And the features don't stop there. The deeper you go down into these documents, the more the game starts to take shape. Almost a full-blown attempt to make the Game Boy Advance feel like it was punching above its weight class. They promise things on paper that almost feel impossible for this hardware. A team-based combat with 3 to 4 characters on the screen at all time. A full suite of fantasy modes, built to let you pick your own squad, any trio, any combination, your own lineup cutting through levels meant to be replayed and re-explored and reshaped through the lens of different characters. Levels were designed with this variety in mind, with hidden corners and alternative paths and character-specific interactions waiting to be uncovered. Destructible environments that reacted to your ki blasts and explosions, not just cracked floors or broken boxes, entire pieces of scenery shifting under the force of your combat, making the world feel fragile beneath the intensity of GT-style fighting. Huge boss encounters against Super Android 17 and the 7 Shadow Dragons, and even revived enemies from earlier arcs in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Bosses sometimes so large they couldn't fit entirely on the screen, characters whose presence would swallow the camera and turn battles into something closer to set-piece showdowns and simple brawler fights. Cutscenes bridging every chapter of the story, small moments stylized in the spirit of Supersonic Warriors designed to give the adventure pacing and emotional shape, tying your gameplay to a larger narrative rhythm. and fully controllable flight, letting you burst off the ground, glide through the air, then slam back into the battlefield without the stiff transition most handheld games forced on you. A way of moving that tried to capture the freedom of Dragon Ball's combat on a very small screen. When you read through all of this, when you start stitching each idea together, you can almost see the silhouette of the game they were reaching for. As for stages, transformation took place on various planets, with Transformation 2 remains on Earth for the duration of the story. The player will end up traveling from one location on the planet to the next, with each varied location representing an entire game level. Each level will have at least one mini-boss and a final boss which the player must contend with. Now, these documents also reveal just how much Transformation 2 wanted to expand the player's experience beyond a simple story run. In fact, the developers didn't picture this as a game you would play once and move on from. They wanted something replayable, something layered, something that gave you the reason to return long after the credits had rolled. The game was designed to be split across multiple modes: a traditional story mode, a full versus mode, and secret section dedicated to unlockables and hidden content. No matter which mode you jumped into, win or lose, the game would reward you with points. Those points could then be spent on new characters, new modes, hidden levels, and bonus features. Even unfinished runs would still count, encouraging experimentation rather than punishing it. Now, story mode of course remained the heart of it all. Immediately available from the moment you boot up the game, this mode was meant to follow the events of GT as closely as possible, but compared to the first transformation, the sequel aimed to give players far more freedom, allowing you to make your own trio before each mission. Then there was multiplayer, which the documents described as far more than simple co-op. The designs wanted players to rely on teamwork just as much as they relied on their own skill. Some rooms would contain multiple ground switches that needed to be activated at the same time, creating situations where coordination mattered, only for the resulting bonus to be claimable by a single player. That blend of cooperation and competition was meant to create a party-like energy. Other situations would force players to split up entirely, tackling different paths of a level on their own before regrouping later on. Strategy would shift on the fly depending on which characters were chosen and how players handled those moments apart. Multiple multiplayer modes were planned as unlockables, ranging from fully competitive score chasing to combo challenges, a power-up collection, race, and even a mode where players fought each other in a small arena, similar to Dragon Ball Advance Adventure, I'd imagine. Players would connect their systems using the Game Link cable, and interestingly, the documentation mentioned a crossover feature for players who owned the first game. With a second Game Boy and a copy of the original game, players could transfer certain hero stats into Transformation 2, as well as unlock special bonuses only available to those who had completed the first game of 100%. And finally, the secret system, a large unlockable grid made up of branching trees. Every mode in the game would reward players with points, and those points could be spent here. Each node on the map represented something new to unlock: characters, villains, levels, alternate moves, new modes, and more. Only items connected to already purchased nodes would become available, so players could choose their own path through the tree, prioritizing certain characters or upgrades depending on how they wanted to play. Now, this document is an interesting snapshot of a game designed around longevity. Something to come back to and explore and gradually push deeper into as more and more of its features starting to open up. And looking back on it all now, there's something strangely beautiful about a game like Transformation, a title that never reached the height of its GBA siblings, yet still tried and still dreamed, still aimed higher than anyone expected it to. Now, Transformation may have been the black sheep of the Game Boy Advance lineup, yet with everything we know, it starts to feel less like an outcast and more like an overlooked chapter, one filled with ambition and heart and kind of rough-edged charm only games from this era can carry. So as always, thank you for walking through this memory with me. If you want to dive deeper into documents and early plans for this game, everything is linked down below. And whether you played Transformation back then or you're just discovering now through this video, I hope this gave you a new way to appreciate the effort behind it. Like what you see here, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, drop a metal cooler in the chat. Until next time, y'all have a damn good one. Peace.